Let's bump it up with Taunt Buff Warrior. Hey, it's Webz here with another Hearthstone deck video. I wanted to do another Warrior deck, however most of the Warrior decks are utilizing cards that have already existed for the past year or so and haven't really changed besides questline. So that limited the amount of choices that I had for a deck. And I noticed there was a bunch of buff cards for Warrior along with some that focus on just taunts themselves. And I thought, why not combine the two ideas into one deck? So this deck tries to emulate aggro taunt druid a little bit by running a bunch of low cost taunt minions and cards that will either draw them or buff them up instead of getting double the taunt minions out in one turn. For mulligans, athletic studies, sword and board, and harbor scamps are usually the cards that you want to keep in your opening hand. It'll allow you to deal with early board or allow you to have a little bit of board presence. War Cache was another card that was useful to keep in your opening hand as it allows you to generate 3 resources for the price of 1. Though you are kind of skipping out on your third turn, but most of the time you don't have a better third turn, so that's why it was included. Now with that being said, let's get into the games. Alright, let's get into game 1 against Warlock. It'll probably be some type of questline Warlock, and we're just going to keep our athletic studies here, since the other two cards don't give us any early game presence. And we draw into 2 of our hand buffs, which is bad, because we have no minions in our hand. We're going to play the deckhand just because it'll be our next weapon and not just the next weapon on our turn. They're questline Warlock, which makes sense. We just need to figure out which variant they're playing so we can play accordingly. Probably assume they're handlock though, as that seems to be the variant that everyone runs. Though I definitely prefer the spell power variant. They're going to play a Neophyte. We'll just kill the Neophyte and then use our Bulwark. Now, if we play our cards right, we'll be able to infinitely buff our Bulwark. Or I should say, buff it up quite a few times before it gets destroyed. Though we should have probably saved it also for later game in case we went into fatigue. So we could have ate some fatigue through that. Which is usually why I include Bulwark into any warrior deck that I make. Especially with how common questline Warlock is right now. They're going to play a Backfire. And pass the turn back to us. Going to play the Man at Arms and then bulk up the Sword Eater. Because that will give us both a taunt minion on board and another weapon. And they got a Viper. I get why more people are running Viper in their decks, since it is a tradable card and you can just trade it away if you need another card instead in different matchups. And especially with Fel Demon Hunter running around right now. Or I should say Fel Quest Demon Hunter. That deck can get quite deadly quite quickly if you let them keep their weapons. And they play Mithril Rod. And tradable also synergizes well with Mithril Rod, so there's no reason not to include some tradable cards in your deck. We're just going to attack face. And then condition our Doctor in order to buff up our weapon to a 4 attack. And now they're at 7 HP. In this position, we should just be able to win. However, questline can come back at any moment. And they're going to play a null and another one, so it was handlock. Which logically makes sense. And they're going to kill our Doctor. If they can't kill our minion here, we just win the game. And it looks like we just win the game. Alright, time for game 2 against Hunter. We're gonna mulligan away the Mule, since we never want to keep that in our opening hand. Going to get a second sword on board instead. I'm assuming this is going to be some type of face hunter, which is the reason why I kept the first sword in board. Their questline though, which is kind of a shock. I don't run into many questline hunters, since it's way more popular just to be face hunter. Which is a shame. Hunter has so many unique and interesting decks that didn't really exist before this set, and yet everyone still falls back onto face hunter. But I guess that's honestly the deck that the class will never move away from, no matter how much I would want it to. The taunts should be a problem for this style of deck, since they're relatively big minions, and Hunter doesn't necessarily have good ways to deal with the big minions. I'm curious of how this questline deck is made. I'm probably assuming it's not going to be a Lady Prestor variant, even though that one's pretty funny to play. Just going to play our Axe. And I briefly thought about using one of the sword and boards on their minion, but we don't necessarily need to do that, so. They're going to play a Wounded Prey, kill our Taunt minion, which is perfectly fine. I'm probably going to assume that is Explosive Trap, just because it'll also trigger their questline, and because we have no minions on board, we'll be able to just trigger it right away. We should probably kill the minion first, though. I'm going to armor up a little bit here. From this position, even if they complete their quest, we should be perfectly fine. We have enough armor and HP in order to survive it. Sure, it will be annoying, but as long as we don't take a few turns to win. They're just going to kill our minion here. We're going to buff up our minions in hand, then play Armor Smith. There's so many unique strategies that Warrior has access to, they just don't have any support right now. Like, it would be cool if Armor Warrior or something like that actually became a thing. I get why Armor Warrior can't really exist. It would be very annoying to play against, but as a mechanic that seems to be centered around this class in particular, it's a shame that it's never really been that much of a thing. We're going to attack first, and then play our mules, because they'll have no way to deal with any of the mules. Sure, they have their quest complete, but still fine. It would be very hard for them to come back from this position. And they concede. Alright, now that we're through the game, let's discuss how well the deck did and why I built the deck the way I did. The deck performed relatively poorly. I knew it was probably going to, as most of the common synergies that people abuse in Warrior right now are either Rush or Pirate, which it falls under the questline. However, I wanted to try something different, as I know there was a bunch of Taunt support that has existed for a while now that Warrior has access to that never has really done anything. And I thought it would be a cool, unique way to take a deck that some people are running, which is buff Warrior, and introduce a new style of synergy within it. The major problem with this variant of the deck is there's no consistency factor within it. Sure, you have cards like Harbor Scamp, which draw into Sword Eater, or the Cutting class, so you can draw even more cards. But there's no way to consistently get to your other taunt minions in the deck, which creates a problem when you're running cards like Bulk Up, or even Feat of Strength, which I did not run in the deck. I wish Warrior had access to some cards like Athletic Studies or Stage Dive to support taunt mechanic within the class. However, it doesn't. So we end up with this pseudo hand buff paladin / aggro taunt druid deck. Because Warrior has access to Morjan Elite, I really wanted to use this card. However, this requires you to include a lot of weapon synergy within the deck, which is something that makes the deck even more inconsistent. I try to run a variety of different packages, such as the Rush package or a Variant package. However, both of those just lowered the consistency of the Taunt synergy within the deck. A card that I had wished I had cut was probably War Cache. I ended up keeping it in the deck just because I thought it would be a good way to refill your cards in your hand. Brawl was also another card that I considered cutting out of the deck, but I always like to be able to board clear your opponent if you need to at any given point, since this deck isn't the quickest deck in the world. It needs some way to be able to deal with a wide board so it can survive. However, most of the time, Brawl just ended up being either A, a dead card because you didn't get it quick enough, or B, my luck with Brawl with this deck was just bad. So my final thoughts on the deck is, if you want something like Hand Buff Paladin or Aggro Taunt Druid, sure, play this deck. If you don't want either of those, I do not recommend this variant of Buff Warrior as a deck to play for the average person, because you're just going to get frustrated when you lose a bunch of games. Hopefully we'll see maybe another new support card for Taunt Warrior in the mini set or the next set. Cards like Mule and Harbor Scamp did help out the deck a bunch, since it added some consistency factor to the deck. But there's no way to either discount your taunts, allowing you to play higher cost taunts, or a big taunt minion that you would want to run in this type of deck. Which kind of sucks, but it is what it is. I wish something like that. Being said, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a comment down below, like and subscribe, and until next time, bye bye.